In my opinion, when history shows a major foul up from a corporation or government, or some form of corruption or ulterior motives like winning a war, it is going to be talked about as much as events of triumph or the result. If we don't learn from history and everything it offers, the good and the bad, then we're bound to repeat it. Now, with all that said, I came across a few colorful examples of this and thought discussing them on a podcast was the next logical step. This one is called, here's the backstory. The United States Radium Corporation, located in Orange, New Jersey, was involved in extracting and purifying radium from a type of ore called carnotite, starting around 1917 and ending around 1926. They used the radium to produce luminous or glow in the dark paints. They employed about 300 workers, mainly women in their 20s, to paint all types of clocks and watches with the glow in the dark paint. They were a major supplier of the glowing watches to the military, with World War I looming. The Radium Dial Company was also using this same type of paint. Although the corporations and scientists were aware of the risk associated with radium, they still told their employees that the paint was harmless. They taught the lip, dip, and paint method, where they would stick the brush in their mouth and put that point
Yeah.
of the brush to a point and do it again. Uh, they became known as ghost girls because of the radium that they were exposed to daily made their clothes, hair, and skin literally glow. They would even go as far to paint their teeth for that glowing smile. So, what happened, you ask? Well, a radiation poisoning, of course. The women's mouths were affected first. They complained of dental pain of all sorts, including loose teeth, lesions, and ulcers. When the women would go get their loose teeth pulled or extracted, they wouldn't heal. They would just stay
Bleed and
festered up
bleed.
and bleed. Yeah. One of the first women to show severe symptoms was Amelia Molly Magia. It started with the removal of one tooth. It quickly spread to the rest of her mouth, causing the aforementioned lesions and ulcers. It even spread to her jaw, causing it to be removed. This became
Mm.
known as radium jaw or necrosis of the jaw. It then moved on to other parts of her body and she eventually died in 1922. By 1924, 50 women had become ill and a dozen had died. Once again, the corporations knew of the risk or probable outcomes.
Did they know it in 1917, or are you saying they knew it by 1920?
At this time they knew of the risk
Yeah,
and
okay.
the possible
Yeah,
outcome.
it's at that point they're like, wait a minute,
Yeah, they kept their
hold
findings
on
from their
here.
employees and urged medical professionals to contribute their deaths to something else. Syphilis was often used as a reason for these women's untimely demise,
Well, yeah,
including Molly's. The aftermath. Litigation was obviously coming, but it started slow. No lawyer wanted to go up against these corporations. Finally, in 1927, attorney Raymond Berry agreed to take on their case. These radium girls were forced to take minimal settlements due to the fact they had just months to live, totaling to an abysmal $10,000. After over a decade of litigation and suits and still denials from the corporation that radium was not to blame, it finally was settled as liability was put on the corporations. Their case was among the first in which a company was held responsible for the health and safety of its employees, and it led to the creation of the U.S. Occupational Safety and Health Administration.
thank you, Radium Ladies, for OSHA.
The next one, sticking with the colorful theme, they're known as the Canary Girls. The backstory: during World War One, the workforce in England was short working. Excuse me. The workforce in England was short working age men. Women were required to step up and work in the factories instead. In fact, close to 3 million women were employed by all kinds of different factories. About a third of those involved manufacturing of munitions. In dealing with the manufacturing of munitions for the war, the women were subjected to long hours, low pay, and hazardous working conditions. Anytime you're dealing with mixing explosives, the conditions will be bad. That was expected. However, what was not expected was the effects of repeated exposure to TNT. The repeated exposure turned their skin and hair to turn yellow.
Oh,
comparable to that of the plumage of a canary. They would all be known as the Canary Girls. These women were mixing the explosives by hand. The chemicals found in the explosives had a reaction with the melanin found in our skin. It stained their skin yellow. The discoloration faded over time and really had no long-term health effects. However, there's always a however, there was more serious reactions and complications. The complications started with sneezing fits, a bad cough, severe sore throat, and, of course, digestive issues. It led to the TNT powder eventually trashing their livers. 400 cases of toxic jaundice were reported, with 100 of those cases turning fatal. It even was passed on through childbirth as canary babies were being born.
Ew.
Right? That'd be very, very scary as a mother
Be
and a
like,
father.
who you been sleeping with, bitch? Where's that Twitty bear looking motherfucker? I'm gonna get him.
Yeah, who's yellow?
Didn't get that from my side of the family, you whore.
And the camera pans over and it's Big Bird standing there.
Ooh, it wasn't me.
Over the years, the women also reported bone disintegration, breast deformation, weakening of the immune system, and dermatitis.
Jesus Christ.
Aftermath. Health and safety measures were amped up to try and limit exposure, but only so much could be done as explosives were obviously needed. I could only find one lawsuit that was filed. It was filed by Lily Moody, former employee of the Royal Arsenal in London. She filed suit for the loss of her stillborn child and for her permanent incapacity. Her claim was denied. Go figure out. These women, although not compensated, did do major help in the advancement of women getting the right to vote in England, and the state recognized them as an essential part of the industrial machine. Well, here's the weird part, or the side note of this, is this was just part of the dangers they were dealing with. You would think dealing with an explosive would be the dangerous part. It has been noted that several workers were injured and killed due to accidental detonations. On average, 2 workers died a week.
Well, yeah. I've watched enough Roadrunner and Coyote cartoons to know that explosives are dangerous.
But you know how they were putting the bombs together? They had to tap on, I don't remember the top cap with a hammer. They had to tap a freaking bomb with the hammer. Tap it too hard, you blow up. Talk about a little bit about Agent Orange. Yeah. South Vietnam asked the United States for help in clearing out the jungle that were providing cover for their communist foes. Between the years of 1962 and 1971, the U.S. military sprayed about 20 million gallons of various tactical use color-coded chemical herbicides, aka the rainbow herbicides, including Agent Orange, over Vietnam and other parts affected by the war. About 60% was the use of Agent Orange. It has been stated the concentration levels were 20 times the normal use for killing plants. The military operation was known as Operation Ranch Hand. I've been learning so much about military operations, all their code stuff. Anyway, over 6,500 spraying missions took place during this time, covering close to 12% of the total area of South Vietnam. Destroyed thousands upon thousands of agricultural land, crops, and mangrove forest. Agent Orange was a 50-50 mixture of 2 herbicides that contained dioxin, a toxic contaminant. I'm not going to read They remained toxic for only days or weeks and then degraded, but dioxin did not degrade as quickly. Like you were talking about earlier, the half-life was several thousands of years of that. This shit would just stay on plants and just stay in the ground. Vietnam veterans were told not to worry about Agent Orange as it was harmless to humans.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, of course, themselves and millions of Vietnamese were affected. Veterans, upon returning home, fell ill. Symptoms included lowered immune system, numbness in your feet and hands, fatigue, difficulty breathing, edema, swelling, and muscle tremors. It led to birth defects, miscarriages, various forms of cancer, and Parkinson's disease. Claims were beginning to be filed in 1977 for their conditions they believed were caused by Agent Orange. Of course, their claims were denied. Of course they were.
It's like we're the government. We don't make
Yeah,
mistakes.
companies, or two, we're going to deny your first claim. That's just the rule. A huge class action lawsuit was brought, estimated to be around 10 million plaintiffs.
Damn.
That is, yeah. Can you imagine
Yeah,
Aaron
I mean,
Brockovich hanging on to that one? Say the class lawsuit, like I said, class action lawsuit had about 10 million plaintiffs. In 1984, this suit was settled out of court for $180 million. Well, they didn't get that much
oh
because there were
no.
so many families affected by this. The Agent Orange Settlement Fund was created to disperse the funds. This
Uh-huh.
settlement fund was in place for only 6 years, closing in 1997 and paying out roughly around $197 million to class members, including roughly 50,000 Vietnam veterans or the survivors, receiving a whopping $3,800 each. After numerous studies and tests, the VA, Veterans of Foreign Affairs, the VA now presumes a Vietnam veteran was exposed just by serving and could be eligible for disability compensation.
Good.
Yeah. Now, this is just a tip of this topic, as this was worldwide. It is massive and still relevant today. The VA even issued a proposed rule in early 2024 to expand the locations and timeframes for presumed exposure to Agent Orange. This went into effect on March 5th, 2024. The average compensation for exposure to Agent Orange ranges from about $1,600 to close to $40,000 per year. This compensation is federal tax free and doesn't affect retirement income.